Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 12 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive series. It's the Dallas Cowboys, America's team. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Are they really America's team anymore, though? Are they really? Could they be considered America's team when they haven't won anything since the early 1990s? I mean, at least the United States is out there winning their battles overseas sometimes, I guess. I mean, sometimes, I guess. I don't know if it's America's team. Maybe America as a country has settled with being only good when it doesn't matter. And I think that's what you're going to get out of this video right here, is you're going to be amazed by how highly I rank these players. Even being a Giants fan, this seems to be like just another year of typical Cowboy stuff where just as a pure roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball, they are fantastic. They just added Andrew Booth, who, the upside there, he got injured. He was a first-round pick prospect out of Clemson for a while. Didn't really work out in Minnesota the first 2 years. Now maybe Dallas works him in there as like cornerback 4. They do have so much depth at the cornerback position now. They actually improved it by making that trade. There's very few things about this Cowboys team that really concern me. I mean, they do have 2 rookie offensive linemen that I do project will probably win starting jobs. That's Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe at center. It's between him and Brock Hoffman right now. I think Beebe's just a phenomenal player. I thought he was a great steal in that draft. I've always been kind of high on him the last couple of years. And he sort of stayed in school there for a while. And I'm glad to see that he made it. And his versatility, I think, is going to be something that people are really going to covet. It's almost like what Joe Tippmann was just a year prior to that, where he was like a tackle. He could play guard. He could play center. Jets ended up drafting him to play center. There is some contract issues, though, with Dallas. It's with CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver. You're going to see how highly I rank him. And then there's going to be the quarterback, Dak Prescott, who again, as a Giants fan, I shockingly rank him quite high. I think last year he played phenomenal football. And outside of that playoff debacle against a quarterback that I like in Jordan Love, it's hard to say. That was like, it's a team game. Are wins a quarterback stat? I think to a degree they can be, and to a degree they're not. I think that Dallas just seems to suffer from the same issues every single year, and that seems to be from a leadership perspective, from like a front office and coaching staff point of view, less so than the players. Like, how can you argue Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Zach Martin, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Osa Odigizua, Deron Bland, Malik Hooker, Trayvon Diggs? Like, there's so much talent on this team that it can only come from a top-down perspective. So Jerry Jones, like him making the comments that he made about CeeDee Lamb is not looking all that good for CeeDee Lamb's future there. I mean, I wouldn't be happy if he said that kind of stuff. Dak Prescott, I think, is a little less concerning because there is the thing where he's holding out. If he just waits a little bit longer for a contract, he could be the one that gets to that like 70 million threshold, just the way the cap is rising. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. CeeDee Lamb seems to be the real concern there. Just Jerry Jones putting his foot in his mouth. And just Jerry's overbearingness on like the coaching staff. You saw Dan Quinn leave. You saw Kellen Moore leave 2 years ago. They got a brand new defensive coordinator, lots of experience. Mike Zimmer, former Cowboys defensive coordinator, former head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. We'll get into how I could see him using certain players on that defense. And then the head coach, Mike McCarthy, who when he got hired, I was really high on him. And now, after a couple years, kind of not so much. So let's start, before we get into the player rankings, let's start with the coaching staff as always and what my thoughts are on them. So this is my overall 19th ranked coaching staff. And we'll start with Mike McCarthy, the head coach. He's my 24th ranked head coach. By far my lowest ranked head coach of the remaining teams. I don't know if any head coach can succeed with this organization at this point. Just with how, like I said, how involved Jerry Jones is at the top. I don't know that Mike McCarthy can truly apply what he needs to apply, throughout an entire season to get the right things done throughout a year and to prepare for the playoffs and prepare to win and take, not have like the weight of the world carry it on his shoulders the entire time. Because, in Green Bay, they won a Super Bowl, beating Pittsburgh with Aaron Rodgers. Granted, you can say that they should have won way more with Aaron Rodgers. And a lot of that's true. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way the front office, again, the way the front office behaved with the Green Bay Packers of not willing to spend in free agency, not willing to really take big swings on the offensive side of the ball in the draft. And it's not that Jerry Jones isn't capable of taking big swings, just sometimes Jerry Jones' ego gets in the way, I think, of his ability to do this job. So maybe in a different situation, Mike McCarthy would be ranked in the top 20, maybe even top 15 head coaches in the NFL, but I just don't think he's in a winnable situation here, and especially because we know how Jerry Jones tends to look at the other, quote, shiny objects in the room, like the new kids on the block. He does that with a lot of the coordinators. He really sucks up to a lot of coordinators. He really kind of puts down his own head coaches in the process of bringing in the coordinators. And you saw it with Jason Garrett, you saw it with Kellen Moore, you saw it with Dan Quinn to a degree. We can't lose Dan Quinn. If we're gonna lose Dan Quinn, there was all these issues here. So you see Brian Schottenheimer, who comes in here. He's the offensive coordinator. When did he get hired? Last year? He got hired last season after Kellen Moore left. He was just an analyst. He was a coaching analyst on the team for a while there. He's had a lot of jobs. There was the Jets one where he really picked it up, and then it was with the Rams for a while. Went back to college to be a quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator for Georgia. Then he was a quarterbacks coach, I believe, for the Colts for a while. Offensive coordinator for Seattle. He was in Jacksonville. I think he was just part of the staff there. I don't know that he was an actual coordinator. He might have been a passing game coordinator for the Jaguars under Urban Meyer, that disaster of a coaching staff that existed. He's never really broken through to be a head coach. Like his dad Marty was a well-respected head coach in the league. And I just don't, I'd say this is a real opportunity for him, because I think the talent level he's working with is as good as he's ever had. He was in Seattle in 2018. They were kind of on the back end of that. It wasn't like it was like the early 2010s when they were like a Super Bowl contender quality team. They sort of ran their course by the time Schottenheimer got there. So I think this is a real opportunity. I think because of how flippant Jerry Jones is in getting rid of head coaches and sort of undermining his head coaches, this could be a real opportunity for him to take over as a head coach maybe next year of this team. Especially if they don't really perform in the playoffs, but they statistically look good in the regular season, which should be expected. And just because of how short the leash seems to be on Mike McCarthy. Overall, Schottenheimer does get the 15th ranking. He's just slightly above the middle of the pack for me. And that just has to do with the fact that he's never really been able to get to that next level. And I figured by now, with how long he's been a coordinator in a league where they really do favor offensive coordinators for head coaching jobs, you just figured he would have had one by now. So there's something that's not clicking with him that maybe, is harder to see as like an outsider looking in. One of the great coaches that they brought in was the replacement for Dan Quinn, and it's Mike Zimmer, who's got all the experience in the world. He used to be a defensive coordinator for Dallas, I believe, before getting the head coaching job. I mean, he went from Dallas to Cincinnati, and then he went to Minnesota to be the head coach there. I thought this was an ambitious move, considering you did lose probably a guy who was a top 2, top 3 defensive coordinator in the entire league. So to go and to make this effort here was just a really, really good move. Zimmer just finished up working with, I think he was working with Deion Sanders at Jackson State and the University of Colorado, just as like a consultant, sort of helping him along the way there. But to get him back into the pros after having all those years off with coaching in Minnesota for all those years, I just like the move. I really do. Maybe his love for the game, his love for the pro game, being able to step back a bit, I think probably helped. Going to the college game, seeing kids who really love it and who want to make it. That revitalizes the love coaches sometimes have for the game. Is you've been in the pros for so long, you're dealing with adults who so many of them are there just for the money, and maybe the love isn't so much there as a business transaction for them. So for him to get that love back for the game, I think is important. Also, being able to be in the college game to sort of assess some of the new players coming into the league as well, and maybe get more in touch with the modernized game, I think will really help him. And he's got a lot of great players to work with, specifically Micah Parsons. And I remember when Parsons came into the league, we'll get more onto him later, but when Parsons came into the league, he got a lot of comparisons to Anthony Barr initially because he had that off-ball linebacker, edge rusher type hybrid position where he could kind of play both. He was sort of built to be able to play both. He had the skill sets to play both. And Mike Zimmer did great things with Anthony Barr when Anthony Barr was a healthy player. So that will be interesting to see if he decides to use Micah Parsons in a variety of ways, and to allow some of the depth that they've built on that defensive line to really shine. I know they lost Sam Williams, but they did draft Marshawn Nealand. So they could be situations, especially on early downs, where Mike Zimmer might be having Nealand and DeMarcus Lawrence on the field with Parsons as more of an off-ball linebacker, strong side linebacker role to really help out in the run game on early downs. That, I think, could be a real possibility. And then just, obviously you want to spend most of the game unleashing Micah Parsons, but how Mike Zimmer uses all this talent, because again, you even go back to those Minnesota years, Minnesota's defense had some talent on it, but kind of like with Brian Schottenheimer, I'm not sure Mike Zimmer's ever had this much talent to work with, at least when he was a defensive coordinator. Those years in Dallas, from when he was on Dallas's staff for like 20 years or something ridiculous. He was there from 94 to 2006. He was just a mainstay there. Defensive assistant, defensive back coach, defensive coordinator, and he gets to now come in there as a defensive back specialist, basically, and he gets Deron Bland, who just had a breakout season, Trevon Diggs, who's really a boomer bust type of a player, but if he can dial him in, maybe he's got something there that he can give Trevon Diggs that keeps him instinctual and allows him to still play without getting burned as often as he does. They just got Andrew Booth from the Minnesota Vikings, who was drafted after he arrived with the team, admittedly, the year after, I believe. Jordan Lewis is still Malik Hooker. He's got a lot of toys to play with on that side of the ball. Eric Kendricks, former Minnesota Vikings inside linebacker. They're reunited there, so how that works out is going to be very interesting. How he breaks out Eric Kendricks, who sort of is on the back end of his career here. And they did have some breakout guys playing at the linebacker position last year, like Marquise Ball. So he gets my 11th ranking just because, again, he was out of the game for a bit. And you hope that the game just hasn't completely passed him by. Which I don't know that he's really, with his level of experience, his level of expertise, and just the talent level that he has, I don't know that he can perform a whole lot worse than this as a defensive coordinator. You go to some of the positional coaches here, really the ones that kind of stand out. You got some young guys in there like Scott Tolzien as your quarterbacks coach. You got Paul Gunther as your defensive run game coordinator. That's that's something to really look at there. Darian Thompson is your quality control assistant linebackers coach, which is weird because he was a safety in the NFL for the Cowboys and the Giants and a couple other teams as well. John Fossil's your special teams coordinator. He's got a plethora of experience doing that. So it's a very interesting staff. There is a lot of upside here, but I just can't. It's hard to rank, particularly Mike McCarthy, which does drag down the overall ranking just because of how Jerry Jones runs this football team. And I think Cowboy fans who are capable of sort of standing outside themselves can. I think you guys can see where I'm coming from with this assessment, and I hope that I was able to sort of articulate it properly. So now we got the quarterbacks, and Dak Prescott is getting a 93 grade for my fourth best quarterback coming into this season. I get it. I understand people have these opinions of Dak Prescott. There's not a lot of things that Dak Prescott does that is worse than too many other quarterbacks. Ahead of him for me, I got Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, and I think Joe Burrow. I think those are the three quarterbacks I got ahead of him. People talk about Jalen Hurts being the best quarterback in the division. I completely disagree. And I forget who said it about him. It was on one of these sports talk shows, and I couldn't have agreed more with the assessment. Forgive me for not remembering exactly who it was. But he says, like, name something that Jalen Hurts does better than Dak Prescott other than the read option. And it's like, you can't really name anything. Like, does the tush push count? Like, maybe that too. But other than the read option, like, he doesn't throw a better deep ball than Dak Prescott. He doesn't throw a more accurate ball than Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott does all these things really well. And I think last year he really showed that he is capable of being like a top 5 quality quarterback in terms of his play. Even though they've been desperately, it seems, trying to replace him. You know, they've kept Cooper Rush there. He's a quality backup quarterback. He's capable of going in there. He's proven it of going in there, winning games in a pinch. Don't know that he has the true ceiling that the Skip Baylesses of the world wish that he had when they were ready to kick Dak Prescott to the curb every 5 minutes because Cooper Rush, went out there and won a game where they very carefully crafted the perfect offensive strategy, a very limited offensive strategy for him that he could easily perform. And then they went and they got Trey Lance, former 3rd overall pick, who ran the ball really well in their game against the Rams in the preseason. Apparently hasn't looked all that great in a lot of training camp. But I think he did show that he's capable of at least being that type of a quarterback and being able to escape and get you yards and extend plays. It's just dialing it in, getting him experience, getting him reps that he's never really had in his pro or college career. And not to be dismissive of Dak Prescott, I think the way that this team has been set up, the way that the running back room has been crafted here, that Dak Prescott is going to work his way into being one of these quarterback run threats. He is tied for 8th, which is, this is the lowest number that I would give to a quarterback that I would actually have some type of impact on the overall running grade of a 75. And I give Trey Lance the same grade here, just because, the sample size isn't really there. If Trey Lance continued to play in the preseason like he did against the Rams, he'd probably get bumped up into more like closer to like an 80 or something. But I think Dak Prescott does have great athleticism, and I do think the way that they've sort of formed this roster, that he's going to be in a position. I also think that with the contract stuff coming up, he's going to come out this year and he's going to be playing like with his hair on fire. And I talked about Jordan Love having MVP bets that I made myself. If I wasn't a Giants fan, I could bring myself to do it. I wouldn't hesitate to also maybe put some money on Dak Prescott winning the MVP of the season, just because I feel like despite how well he's played the last couple of years, the expectations for him have been almost unfair for him to reach, that he's going to be coming out as a man possessed this year. And he's got great receiving weapons. The offensive line's been built well. He's got all the tools around him right now, and he's got all the tools within himself to have that MVP season. I just think that he's going to it's scary to have him out here in the situation that he's in. If he doesn't stick around in Dallas, man, it's going to be a tragic mistake by Jerry Jones in this front office, because you do have a quality quarterback here. What you need is other things. He's not the problem with this team at all. People can talk about him making mistakes in key situations. Okay, yeah, but you also got to talk about play calling in that situation. You got to talk about what other players on the field are doing in those situations. What was called of him in those situations? Is he called like, hey, you got to try and force something in here and make a big play? You got to do, like, everyone sort of gives Dak Prescott that play against the 49ers where they had no timeouts and he ran and he slid and they had no time left and they ended up losing the playoff game because of it, as if that was his fault at all, that the offensive coordinator and the head coach called a designed quarterback draw. Like, how is that? That's not his fault. He's running the play that was called and trying to get the yards and trusting his coach, and maybe he shouldn't have, but what would this say about him as a quarterback and them as a team in a front office if their quarterback isn't trusting their coach's calls? So I'm sick to my stomach defending him this much. I really am. I really am sick to my stomach defending Dak Prescott this much. But, fair is fair. And this is what I was talking about how they built the running back room. This has got running back by committee written all over it. They are 31st in terms of the high upside of the running backs. Ezekiel Elliott is their best running back by my estimation. He played pretty well for the Patriots. Hearing that Rico Dowdle could possibly beat him out for the starting job wouldn't really surprise me, just because of the amount of mileage on Ezekiel Elliott. Even though I think he's the better player, I think that making Dowdle sort of like your mainstay, especially early in the season, could help long term with this overall running back room's performance, and specifically Ezekiel Elliott, to maybe get him to perform at a higher level than maybe he should if he was the bell cow back for this team. They also got some interesting depth so far. Don't know what this is going to look like after they start making cuts, or what this could look like a day from now, obviously, if the rosters are ever changing. But Royce Freeman, Snoop Conner, Malik Davis, some depth there for early down backs. See Deuce Vaughn there. He's not really a first and second down running back, turn around, hand the ball off. But to me, he's the third guy in this room because of what he's going to bring as a receiving back. It is tied for 27th. He does have a lot to prove. There was the Darren Sproles comparisons early in his career, in his college career coming into the league. He's going into his second year now. And it'll be interesting to see if he gets the opportunity to live up to that. He was sort of buried behind Tony Pollard, who did take a lot of these reps, so had to take on this role. Now I really think with Ezekiel Elliott there, and with Rico Dowdle not really being this type of player, that this is a real opportunity for Deuce Vaughn to work himself into a very prominent role in this offense, and make Dak Prescott's life a little easier as a little gadget player perhaps that they could have. They can split him out, run him in some motions, really manipulate defenses with the way they use Deuce Vaughn. It's just hard to rank him highly because the sample size just isn't there compared to other players in the league. But I do think that the potential for Deuce Vaughn this year is very high. All of his work is going to get done in these situations. It's going to be, when you spread the defense out, maybe you run a draw play with him. But a lot of the things you're going to want to get him out in space, out wide, so he can, be the shifty, basically running in between people's legs, the way that you would see like a Brian Mitchell way back in the day. Almost dating myself. How old do you guys think I am? And Darren Sproles before him, like what they thought Tariq Cohen could have been before the injuries crept up on him. I think Deuce Vaughn can really take on that type of a role and be really successful at it. But when you talk about all this stuff here, this is the competition for a majority of the running back reps. I think one of these guys is going to be looking at like 50 to 55, 60% of the reps this year of total snaps. And I think somebody else will be there looking at like 30%-ish. And I do think that Deuce Vaughn's going to get somewhere around 20% of the overall reps this year. If their running back room can stay healthy, if they can find some type of rhythm here with how they're subbing guys in and out and how they're using these guys interchangeably. It's just very... And again, you got to include Dak Prescott into all this, because I do think that he's going to be as much a part of this as anybody else. It wouldn't surprise me if they did have some like read option plays called and designed and drawn up here just for him to get out in space and use his athleticism. There was the fear of him because of the injury he suffered against my New York Giants when he had like that corkscrew break in his leg or whatever, running the ball. And you do want him to be more of a pocket passer, but adding him to this group does bring the running game up to a different level than it would otherwise. If you did have like a Kirk Cousins at quarterback instead, it wouldn't help this aspect of the game, and it would really drag down this room a lot further in terms of what level of production they could possibly get on early downs, just running the football and, you know, shortening the game and running the clock and extending drives and keeping opposing offenses off the field. Where if they're just throwing the ball over and over and over and over again, I don't care how good your defense is at that point, they're going to get exhausted, and that's when you're going to get points put on you. So it's really important that they find the balance in this running back room to enhance the running game. Moving on to the weapons here, and we'll start with the wide receivers. This is my 12th ranked wide receiver room, and they're top heavy, baby. CeeDee Lamb gets a 96 grade here. Top 5 wide receiver in the league. He's got real, like, 1,600 yard, 15 touchdown, 120 catch capabilities this year, I think, especially because his quarterback's going to be playing out of his mind. He's got some interesting compliments here. Brandon Cooks and Jalen Tolbert. Right now, for me, are the two guys for them. I think Brandon Cooks, at his age, at this stage in his career, he can still be a great contributor. I just don't know that he's going to be a contributor the way people expected him to be when he first came over to this team. You know, it's hard to maintain the level that he has done a good job of having in his entire career. You get to some of the depth here. Martavis Bryant was not a member of this team as of today, so, you know, he is still listed there, unfortunately. So just ignore him. He is one of the people that did get cut. People are talking about him going to, I think, Atlanta. But they got Kevontae Turpin, who can be another gadget player along with Deuce Vaughn that we talked about earlier. Jalen Brooks had a couple good plays in the preseason so far. But the real story here is CeeDee Lamb. And CeeDee Lamb's got one of those rare talents where he's got physicality, he's got speed, he's got great route running, he can play on the outside, win some contested catches, he can play in the slot a lot of the time as well. Especially with this group of three, you see Jalen Tolbert and Brandon Cooks playing on the outside. CeeDee Lamb slides right into that slot role, and it's a matchup nightmare. And that's where he can really do a lot of damage, but he needs to be on the team. And Jerry Jones needs to pay him. I don't know what the hesitation is. He's, other than Dak Prescott, he's your best player on this offense. He's a top 3 player on your team. Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb are your 3 best players. You need to pay all 3 of them. I don't know what the hesitation is here. It'll be a tragic mistake if they don't keep him and keep him happy. The same way with Dak Prescott. It's a really weird dynamic when you got this level of volatility with your 2 best players, but it says a lot again about the Cowboys have run their organization and why they can have this much talent and not win a damn thing. You get to the tight end room, talking about talent. They have the 6th best tight end by my estimation. That's Jake Ferguson. Not a lot of depth there. You know, you'll see Hendershot now every now and then find his way into, you know, poaching a touchdown from somebody. They drafted, they either drafted or they picked him up as a UDFA, Brevin Spanford. They drafted Loon Shoemaker last year, who was like more of just a straight up blocking tight end. They used a 2nd round pick on him. I'm a Michigan guy, and I couldn't believe they made that pick. So, I mean, he'll come in probably on early downs, but Jake Ferguson is not like Jake Ferguson's a bad blocker or anything. So I don't know. Maybe they'll run some 2 tight end sets and try to help that, you know, have the numbers advantage and hand the ball to Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle and Royce Freeman and Snoop Connor and stuff, and try to shorten games that way with more jumbo sets. And that's how you use Shoemaker, and then maybe you have move Jake Ferguson in motion or something like that. I don't know. Jake Ferguson, great player. Phil Dalton Schultz's shoes and better than all that. So no shortage of weapons for Dak Prescott to throw the ball to. Just some amazing talents here and a variety of different talents. You know, Brandon Cooks still got that little shifty straight line speed, deep threat. Jalen Tolbert still has to really find his way into the league. But I think as outside receiver as a 3rd or 4th option in this offense, in this passing game, I think that's a great role for him to have. Even with Kevontae Turpin and Jalen Brooks as being like some depth pieces here, Turpin has his own role carved out on this team just because of his ability. I would almost put him and Deuce Vaughn as sort of starter and backups for each other. If Turpin really performs really well, I think that's going to eat into the snaps of Deuce Vaughn before it eats into the snaps of, say, a Jalen Tolbert. And that's just because of the styles here. And Jake Ferguson, if Jake Ferguson does get hurt, then I do think that you lose a tremendous part of this offense, like a really underrated part of this offense, a real like foundational piece of the offense. So that's something to look for, but he's also somebody who by the end of the season, I would expect to have top 3 tight end numbers. You got Kelsey, you got Kittle, and then I would say Jake Ferguson's probably the next man up for that, which says a lot because you got some really good tight ends in the league like Hawkinson and Mark Andrews. But statistically, Jake Ferguson, I think, could have a giant year. So I would put some money on him on the overs for a while, at least early in the year, while Vegas probably has his numbers pretty low. Let's go to the offensive line, and this is my 13th pass blocking O-line. You can see the 2 rookies there, Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe, who I talked about at the top. I love the Cooper Beebe pick. The Tyler Guyton pick, okay, yeah, sure. It's a real building piece. He's coming in as a decent pass blocker to start. I think the run blocking's a real thing you're going to suffer with there. Tyler Smith, very good pass blocker. He's a great run blocker. We'll get to those at some point early here. Zach Martin, veteran, solid across the board. Still a real great guard in the league, even though he's getting up there in years and eventually he's going to have to get moved on from. But that's why they got Cooper Beebe, who will start his career at center from the looks of it, and potentially when Zach Martin is done, move over to guard, and they'll maybe get somebody who's more traditional center for that role. Because Beebe's not exactly a true center. He's sort of just got this, again, like he's got this weird versatility to him where he can play all 5 positions. So he's just a guy you want on the field, and I don't understand why he's a backup currently listed to Brock Hoffman, other than the fact that he's just a rookie. But I think at some point in this season, he's going to take over as a starter, and I have it projected in the first 2 or 3 weeks. Terrence Steele seems to be the only weak link on this offensive line. He had one really good year, and that's it. That's all. So, to me, he's the weak link out there. Depth pieces and all that. You got Josh Ball, Bass, and Bostic, I guess, like Asim Richards. So it's not really a top. It's a top heavy offensive line. You don't want to really lose all these people, but I do think you can have an underrated competition with Terrence Steele at some point. But Brock Hoffman and Cooper Beebe seem to be the competition right now, the main competition in training camp. And you can tell by the rankings, an 80 and a 57. I don't get it at all. Even when you get into the run blocking, they do drop to 22nd. Tyler Smith takes a giant step up. Beebe and Martin do take steps down. Guyton takes a significant step down. This is the real weak spot of Tyler Guyton's game coming into this season. How he improves, maybe playing next to Tyler Smith is really going to help him help his development, accelerate his development. Terrence Steele, again, just not very good. Zach Martin in the running game, as you get older, it gets tougher, right? And Cooper Beebe playing the center position, he's sort of out of position to a degree, so that could affect his ability in the run game, snapping the ball and then having to get off. That's a completely different animal than just playing guard and then being able to get off into wherever your assignment is in the run blocking scheme. And I don't think a lot of people take that into account. Not a lot of depth, though. Josh Ball is sort of overall the best backup lineman that they have in their disposal. Matt Waletzko's never really developed into anything here. Again, Brock Hoffman's just terrible. I don't know why they have him listed as a starter. I refuse to do it because I don't think it's going to last. It can't last. They can't be that incompetent to not play Cooper Beebe almost right away. But the running game is going to be the deficiency of this offense, and the run blocking doesn't help. But having the pass blocking quality that they have, combined with the quarterback and the weapons, this really helps maintain the very high floor that this passing offense is going to have this year. Just because, this having a almost top 15, almost borderline top 10, because the rankings are very close in certain areas. A borderline top 10 pass blocking offensive line with the offensive weapons they have in the quarterback, that's the makings for, epic level play. Not to try to sound hyperbolic, but it does look good for what they've built this team to be. So like I talked about with the tight end and wide receiver blocking, it gets an A. It's one of the best wide receiver and blocking teams in the entire NFL. Jake Ferguson, Luke Shoemaker. It's hard to find a better 1-2 punch than that. And again, really great starters. You do lose some in the depth there at the tight end and the offensive line. So overall, this is my 10th ranked offense, 5th ranked passing offense with an 81.9 grade, 22nd in the run game with a 73.5. But still very much a top 10 offense. I'd say this is, again, at worst. Now we're moving on to the defensive side of the ball. We'll start with the edge room, the edge rush, and they are tied for second in the NFL. You got Micah Parsons, who's probably, top 2, top 3 edge rushers in the entire league. And then DeMarcus Lawrence, who's probably one of the most high-end number 2 edge players in the entire league. Very good 3-down player, even though they have so much depth. Now with Sam Williams out, I think his snap count will go up. Because, again, the next best player is Marshawn Kneeland. So I think that does hurt DeMarcus Lawrence's long-term production for the season, because he is going to get a lot more snaps than probably first anticipated. But when you get in these true passing situations, Micah Parsons is going to be going after the passer, and he can line up not necessarily on the edge. You'll see him line up directly over a center. You'll see him line up over the guards. You'll see him stacked on the side with DeMarcus Lawrence. He will go everywhere, and that's a huge advantage that you have with a player like Micah Parsons, because he's somebody you have to immediately identify if you're a quarterback. If you didn't have Micah Parsons, you would still have to do that with DeMarcus Lawrence, just to be responsible. So the fact that Micah Parsons has to eat up all this attention really opens up things for DeMarcus Lawrence. I think it's really going to open up things for Kneeland as well. And whoever else out of this group gets snaps and reps here on these pass rush situations. But then when you get to even early down work, like this early edge against the run work, they're tied for third. And this is where DeMarcus Lawrence takes over as one of the best in the entire league at this. Micah Parsons, very, very serviceable, I would say. Not great. You'll see Micah Parsons in the run game play overly aggressive, and well coached, well schemed up teams can take advantage of that in the run game. I think that with Mike Zimmer now, like we talked about a little bit earlier, him moving in, him getting some of that Anthony Barr type of a role that we saw in those Zimmer Minnesota defenses, I think is something to look for. I think that especially on early downs where you can maybe get in, you can increase the quality of the overall 11 on the field, particularly the front 7 in these situations. I would look out for that, but even if you don't, you still have, again, a very high-end number 1 and a high-end number 2 defensive end in those scenarios. Then when you even get to their complements on the interior, they're tied for 10th for interior rush. Chauncey Golston is like this weird hybrid player, but because there's so much depth, I could see him getting much more defensive and traditional defensive end reps now that Sam Williams is out. I would look for that, and then maybe that's when Mozzie Smith ends up now getting more playing time because of it. So like the way that the ripple effect of that Sam Williams injury, I think could affect the playing time, but I think it also opens up a lot more potential for the combinations you could see. I think you could see Chauncey Golston playing a more traditional defensive end position and moving guys around. Like, you can have Micah Parsons playing over top of the center next to Osa Odighizuwa, and then Chauncey Golston's playing defensive end, and you're still in a good situation. You know, he's very, very much undersized when he kicks to the inside. He sort of got stuck in that role because of the way the other depth was. Osa Odighizuwa is really starting to come into his own. It's a bit of a slow burn for him, but I do like him becoming like this middle of the pack, you know, top 20, top 15 interior rusher on these passing situations. He's a good number 2 to have, especially with the compliments that you have there off the edge. You know, he's going to be in some very desirable situations. He's not going to be getting a lot of attention from offensive lines and from, you know, double teams and all that. Those are going to be very much reserved for Micah Parsons and to a degree DeMarcus Lawrence. You know, Mazi Smith gets a good grade here. I think a lot of his work, just because of Chauncey Golston's inside capabilities in these situations, is going to come on early downs. They are 22nd for their interior defensive line. They don't have a lot of depth, though. So this is where Mazi Smith is really going to shine, is because they don't have the depth on the interior for these early down running situations, and there's just not a lot going on there. And you hope that he can build off of the athleticism and the size and the strength that he has to become that. Just because there are just not going to be as many opportunities there in passing situations. This is where they're going to want to get a guy like Golston on the field. And, you know, your best 4 guys in these scenarios. And I think that you are playing most of your game with this, but you also, because of the different skill sets you have, the different variety of size and everything, Mike Zimmer's going to be able to find a lot of different combinations here week to week that are going to keep offensive coordinators having nightmares and losing sleep, because it's going to be so difficult to prepare for this front 4, because you're not going to be able to know not only which 4 are you getting, but where are they lining up. There's a scenario here where Chauncey Golston is playing defensive end with Marshawn Kneeland, and then Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence are playing interior defensive line positions. That's a real possibility. That's a real thing that I think you're going to see that. I'm saying it now, you're going to see that type of a group out there on the field. And a quarterback, especially a young quarterback like a Jaden Daniels, isn't going to know what to do. He's not going to know what to adjust to. He's not going to know what to call to. And it's going to be long games for teams like Washington come next season. This is just a tremendous, tremendous group. Now going to their linebackers and pass coverage, they're 5th in the league. Marquise Bell played great last year. He was one of the highest rated linebackers in pass coverage last season. He was so great, and I think this is where he really gets to step in. Maurice Liafu was drafted this year out of Notre Dame. I think he's a great option as well here. We talked about Eric Kendricks, the veteran, got a lot of familiarity with Mike Zimmer. I think at this stage of his career, you're going to see him a lot more on early downs. Damone Clark is going to be competing with Liafu, I think, for reps in these situations. I think that Bell's just the guy. Bell's just, I think, their best linebacker. Even when you get to linebackers against the run, they do fall down to 28th. I do think that you're going to get Eric Kendricks. You're going to get Damone Clark in those situations. But Marquise Bell, I think, will come up and be like that 7th man in the box. But I think just still overall, they're not going to be that good up the middle with these linebackers against the run. So much of what this linebacker group is really great and designed to be is in coverage. Bell's size, I think, comes into play a lot there, which is why I think on early downs, he's still going to be on the field, but he'll be kicked out as sort of like an 8th man in the box type of a role. I do think there's a lot of variety that you can use with him. Liafu, I think, is the big, question mark, though, because if he plays really well, then I think that does raise this group up. If he doesn't play up to this grade, then Damone Clark is probably going to be the one getting a lot of the playing time, and it will lower this group's overall grade, potentially closer to 10th than in the top 5 like I have them right now. But it's a tale of two different styles and skill sets amongst the same group of players. So you're gonna get high end play from this group in those passing situations, but you also, because of also combining this group with the interior defensive line, you're going to be opening yourself up to be a little squishy in the run game and put a lot more pressure on your defensive ends like Parsons and Lawrence to make more plays and to play more aggressive, which I think will play into the hands of more creative offensive coordinators and be able to take advantage of that. And I think you'll see a lot of big, successful big run plays against Dallas throughout the year. So they're going to be relying a lot on their offense to give them leads and to score a lot of points to force teams to throw the ball and play into their strengths defense-wise. Going to the defensive backs, we'll start with the cornerback room. They're tied for 8th here. DaRon Bland just had an amazing season last year, was very aggressive. He was like what Trayvon Diggs was without getting completely destroyed if he wasn't making a big play. And I think that's always been the problem with Trayvon Diggs. He still gets a decent grade here. He's still like a very high end 2 for me. There's just the concerns about how often he's getting just beat really badly in coverage because he does play too aggressively sometimes. And the net good is he'll force a lot of turnovers, but he's also going to give up equally amount of big plays to the offense. So you have to really weigh what that looks like. And I think, Jordan Lewis is a really good veteran player to have. Them bringing him back as often as they do to be like a slot inside out type of a player. Him and DaRon Bland sort of going inside and out amongst each other will make this a lot more of a versatile group. And Mike Zimmer's specialty is in defensive back. So him being able to get his hands on DaRon Bland and Trayvon Diggs in particular, I think is going to be very beneficial to them long term and smarten them up. I think in the film room, they might get a little bit extra than what they got from Dan Quinn. Not that Dan Quinn's an amazing defensive coordinator, better defensive coordinator, I think, than Mike Zimmer, but I think little nuances of the skill set that Zimmer has compared to Dan Quinn, I think could help these guys out. A different perspective, a different point of view, a different philosophy might help them dial in some of those, particularly Trayvon Diggs, dial in the mistakes that they make that result in the big plays. Again, they got Andrew Booth. Kalen Carson, for like a month, was getting first round buzz. And they end up getting him too. So I actually really like the depth they got here. I think Andrew Booth gets a real opportunity to sort of reset and restart his career after things just never clicked in Minnesota. I think coming here will help him. Kalen Carson, I think, is going to get time to develop, hopefully. CJ Goodwin has got some safety flexibility. Josh DeBerry, again, is going to be competing based upon special teams work. You get to their safeties, though, on the back end. In coverage, they're 23rd. Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson. A decent 1-2 punch. Wanye Thomas and Israel Mukwamu and Sheldrick Redwine. You'll see those guys, they're going to have opportunities to compete as well. Just you don't love them in pass coverage. You'll love them in defensive back run support, though. Malik Hooker was out of this world good in the run game last year. They're tied for 5th overall. The rookie Julius Wood, I think he might get some special teams. He might make the team based upon his ability to play on special teams just because he is a good tackler. And Donovan Wilson, these guys, they're good. They're a good group to have. You wish that you could flip these rankings here, but their ability to help out in the run game, I think, actually helps out, again, with the way this team was designed, where, you look at the same thing with the LA Chargers, and we talked about it with the LA Chargers video, where, the interior defensive line, the linebackers against the run, it's less than desirable, But when you have the quality you have at the safety position to be able to come up into the box and make plays and make sure-footed plays, you are potentially cutting down on a lot of the big plays that you would be giving up otherwise. Like if this DB run support group was 23rd instead of tied for 5th and it was flipped, I would be a lot more concerned about the run game than I already am, and I'm very concerned about it, but I would be that much more concerned about it. But I do like that they got these guys back there that can really chip in, really help. You just need them to stay healthy, particularly Malik Hooker, who looked like his career was over, came here to Dallas and helped revitalize it. But overall, I think you're looking at a really good quality defensive back group. There really isn't a weak spot, a true weak spot on this defense, in terms of the overall group itself, which is just fantastic. And you even look at the cornerbacks against the run, they get an A as well. So it's just a lot of help from the defensive backs in the run game that you hope can then bleed over and really help out the linebackers and the interior linemen, that you're playing so well outside the tackles in the run game that it sets up these less than desirable talents in terms of their play against the run in the middle between the guards, that it helps them, and it helps them outperform these rankings. But despite that, this is still the best defense in the league for me. Talent-wise, everything. I talked about their run defense. They're still the 7th ranked run defense for me. It's really just the interior guys and the linebackers. You want them to be a little bit better, but everything else around them is so good that, again, it's going to make up for a lot of that. You do fear the big plays running up the middle in the run game because of over-aggressiveness, but I think that'll be most of the time this defense is going to be set up to succeed, especially because they have the 4th ranked passing defense, which with the offense that they have, the offense is hopefully going to be scoring a lot of points, setting this team up to play super aggressive pass defense, and that plays into the strengths of your pass rushers and of your cornerbacks in particular, and that's just a recipe for disaster for opposing offenses. So overall, they are ranked 12th, they're 10th ranked offense, the best defense, and they're just dragged down by the coaching staff, and the coaching staff is dragged down by the front office. I harped on that stuff enough, but I think that you can see how they kind of fall out of the top 10 for me, despite having such an amazing talented offense, amazing talented defense, typical Cowboys of the last 20 years, all the talent in the world, but there's just something missing in the top-down aspect. And there you have it, my number 12 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive series, the Dallas Cowboys. What are your thoughts on this video? What are your thoughts on the Cowboys? Leave it in the comment section below. Thumbs up the video. It helps out with the algorithm. Subscribe so you don't miss any of the future videos. And by future videos, I mean the ones on either side of my head, whether it be an actual video itself or the playlist itself with all the videos from this series going all the way back to my number 32 team, all the way to number 1 by the time I'm eventually done it. So don't miss any of those videos. Subscribe at my chin, and I will see you guys hopefully with the next video next time.